Meloria Walker, 32, stared at the text message that had just destroyed her world. You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. Your sister owns that house now. The message sent by her own father made her hands shake uncontrollably. The home she'd poured her heart and savings into for 5 years gone. Stolen by her own family. What they didn't know was that Meloria had prepared for this betrayal, and they would soon regret ever underestimating her. Before I dive into the most devastating family betrayal of my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever been blindsided by family, hit that like button. Trust me, you'll want to see how this karma plays out. Subscribe to join our storytelling family because this tale of family revenge is just getting started. I was raised to be the perfect daughter. As the firstborn of Robert and Diana Walker, I had always carried the weight of their expectations. My sister Cassidy, 4 years younger, grew up with significantly fewer restrictions. While I was expected to maintain a 4 gigapascals, participate in every extracurricular activity that would look good on college applications, and return home by 9 p.m. sharp, Cassidy enjoyed the freedom to make mistakes, to learn from them, and to be herself. Growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio, we lived in a modest 3-bedroom home. My parents worked tirelessly, Dad as an accountant at a local firm and Mom as an elementary school teacher. They valued education, hard work, and most importantly, family loyalty. Blood is thicker than water, my father would say during our Sunday dinners. When the world turns against you, family is all you have. How ironic those words would become. I followed their blueprint for success perfectly. I graduated top of my class, earned a full scholarship to Ohio State, and pursued a degree in architecture. I was the child who called home twice a week, who came back for every holiday, who listened to their advice. Meanwhile, Cassidy dropped out of college after 2 semesters, cycled through retail jobs, and developed a concerning pattern of dating men who treated her poorly and often asked for loans she'd never get back. Yet somehow Cassidy remained the favorite. When she called crying about a breakup or a bounced check, my parents would rush to her rescue emotionally and financially. When I faced challenges in my demanding career, or went through my own difficult breakup with my college sweetheart after 6 years together, I was expected to be strong and figure it out on my own. You've always been the independent one, my mother would say, as if my self-sufficiency was a reason to offer me less support, not more recognition. 5 years ago, my grandmother Eliza passed away. She had been my refuge throughout childhood, the one person who saw beyond my achievements and loved me simply for who I was. During summers at her lake house, I would help her garden, and we'd talk for hours about everything from ancient architecture to her travels around the world as a young woman. You remind me of myself, she'd often tell me, strong-minded but soft-hearted. When she passed, I was devastated. The reading of her will brought an unexpected twist. She had left her lake house to me. The property was worth approximately $380,000, a charming 3-bedroom cottage on Lake Erie with a private dock and nearly an acre of land. My parents were shocked. Cassidy was furious. "This isn't fair," Cassidy had complained loudly at the lawyer's office. "I'm struggling to even pay rent on my apartment, and Meloria already has a condo in the city. She doesn't need this." The lawyer had simply adjusted his glasses and continued reading. "To my granddaughter Meloria, I leave my lake house with the hope that she will find peace there just as I did. I know she will honor its history and create new memories within its walls." My parents pulled me aside afterward. "You should consider selling it and splitting the money with your sister," my father suggested, though his tone made it clear this wasn't merely a suggestion. "Or at least let Cassidy live there," my mother added. "She could really use the stability." I was still grieving, but I stood my ground. Grandma wanted me to have it. "I'm not selling it, and I'm not giving it away." The drive home was tense. That night, I received a series of texts from Cassidy, ranging from guilt-tripping to outright accusations that I had somehow manipulated our grandmother. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the lake house the next morning, sat on the dock with my feet in the water, and cried until I had no tears left. Over the next few months, I split my time between my condo in Cincinnati and the lake house. I worked remotely when possible and commuted when necessary. I poured my savings and my heart into renovating the property, updating the kitchen, reinforcing the dock, and landscaping the overgrown garden back to its former glory. Each improvement was a tribute to my grandmother, a way of honoring her memory. My parents visited only once during those 5 years. They brought Cassidy, who walked through the house, commenting on everything I'd changed for the worse, and asking if she could take furniture pieces that she had always loved. When I refused to let her take Grandma's antique writing desk, the one where I'd watched her write letters every summer morning, Cassidy stormed out, and my parents followed after giving me disappointed looks. What they didn't know was that I had been documenting everything. Every cent I put into the house, every hour of labor, every design choice. I kept meticulous records, took before and after photos, and saved every receipt. I did this partly because I'm organized by nature, but also because something in my gut told me I needed to protect myself. That instinct was validated last month when I received a letter from my parents' lawyer. They were contesting the will, claiming that my grandmother had not been of sound mind when she made her decision, and that there was evidence of undue influence on my part. The letter suggested we settle out of court by transferring ownership of the lake house to my sister, who, according to them, needed it more. I called my parents immediately. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked when my father answered. "It's what's best for the family," he replied coldly. "Your grandmother would have wanted to help Cassidy if she had known about her struggles." "Her struggles are the result of her own choices," I argued. "And Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. She told me herself that she was leaving me the house because she knew I would care for it." "Well, that's your version of events," my mother chimed in from the extension. We remember differently. The call ended with my father saying they would give me time to make the right decision before things got messy. I hung up and immediately called Sarah Chen, a college friend who had become a successful attorney specializing in estate law. I forwarded her the letter and explained the situation. "This is a weak case," Sarah assured me after reviewing everything. "They're hoping you'll cave under pressure. The will is solid, you were named explicitly, and your grandmother was evaluated by her doctor just 2 weeks before signing it. But be careful, Meloria. Family disputes can get ugly fast." Sarah's warning echoed in my mind as I drove back to the lake house that evening, unaware that within 24 hours my family's betrayal would reach heights I couldn't have imagined. The next morning, I woke up early to the sound of waves lapping against the shore. I made coffee and carried it out to the deck where I often sat to watch the sunrise, a ritual my grandmother and I had shared. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "We need to talk about the house. Coming over at noon. No question, no request, just a statement." Typical Cassidy. I spent the morning preparing for what I assumed would be another dramatic confrontation. I gathered all my documentation: the will, renovation receipts, tax payments, insurance papers, and placed them neatly in a folder. If Cassidy wanted to talk about the house, I would show her exactly how much time, money, and love I had invested in it. At precisely noon, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. But it wasn't just Cassidy who emerged. My parents stepped out too, followed by a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. My stomach dropped. This wasn't going to be a talk. It was an ambush. I met them at the front door, blocking the entrance. "What's going on? Who is this?" I asked, nodding toward the stranger. "This is Gregory Phelps, our attorney," my father said, his voice unnervingly calm. "May we come in? This is still technically a family property." Reluctantly, I stepped aside. They filed into the living room, the room where my grandmother had taught me to play chess, where we had spent countless rainy afternoons reading books side by side. Now it felt invaded, contaminated by their presence. "Let's get straight to the point," Mr. Phelps began, opening his briefcase. "Your parents have uncovered some concerning information about the circumstances surrounding your grandmother's will." What information? I challenged, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother spoke up, her tone sickly sweet with false concern. "Honey, we found Grandma's journals. She wrote about feeling pressured about you visiting more often in those last months and talking constantly about how much you loved this house." My heart raced. Of course I visited her. She was dying, and unlike the rest of you, I actually made time for her. "And yes, we talked about this house. It's filled with memories for both of us," Cassidy scoffed. "Convenient memories that led to you inheriting a lakefront property." Mr. Phelps slid a document across the coffee table toward me. "We also have testimony from your grandmother's caretaker during her final weeks. She recalls overhearing you discussing property values and renovation plans with a friend on the phone while visiting." I stared at him in disbelief. "That was my friend Sarah, who happens to be a real estate attorney. Grandma was worried about the property taxes increasing and asked me to get information. Sarah was helping us understand the legal implications." "That's not how the caretaker remembers it," my father said dismissively. "This is insane," I said, standing up. "You're twisting innocent conversations to build some conspiracy theory that I manipulated my dying grandmother. She was sharp until the very end, and you know it." Mr. Phelps cleared his throat. "Nevertheless, we have enough to create reasonable doubt about the validity of the will. However, your parents are willing to avoid a lengthy court battle if you agree to transfer ownership to Cassidy, who frankly has greater financial need." I laughed bitterly. Greater financial need she created herself. Meanwhile, I've put over $150,000 of my own money into renovating this place. Does that count for nothing? "We can reimburse you for verifiable expenses," my father offered as if he were being generous. "Say $50,000. That's not even close to what I've invested," I protested. Cassidy rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you've always exaggerated. Those IKEA cabinets in the kitchen hardly cost what you're claiming." Her words cut deep, not because they were true, but because they revealed how little they knew about what I'd done here. The kitchen cabinets were custom-built by a local craftsman using reclaimed wood from a barn that had stood on the property in the 1800s. My grandmother had told me stories about that barn, and I had wanted to incorporate its history into the home. "I want you all to leave," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Now." My mother reached for my hand, which I quickly pulled away. "Meloria, be reasonable. This is what's best for everyone. Cassidy needs stability, a fresh start. You can continue living in your condo." "This isn't about what's best for everyone," I shot back. "This is about what Cassidy wants, like it's always been." My sister's face hardened. "That's not fair. You've always been the golden child, the successful one. For once in your life, you could think about someone other than yourself." The hypocrisy was staggering. I had spent my entire life thinking of others, adjusting my plans to accommodate family events, lending money that was never repaid, listening to Cassidy's endless relationship dramas, and now I was being cast as the selfish one. Mr. Phelps stood straightening his tie. "I'll leave these papers with you to review. We're prepared to file a formal contest to the will by the end of the week if we don't reach an agreement." After they left, I called Sarah immediately and explained everything. She was furious. "They're bluffing. The caretaker testimony is hearsay at best, and journals can be easily manipulated. Don't sign anything." I spent that night pacing the house, touching the walls, the door frames, the window sills, all the places I had carefully restored. This wasn't just property to me. It was a connection to the one person who had truly seen and accepted me. The thought of Cassidy living here, probably neglecting its maintenance and eventually selling it to fund whatever lifestyle she was pursuing at the moment, made me physically ill. The next morning, I decided to go for a run along the shore to clear my head. When I returned, something felt off. The front door, which I was certain I had locked, was slightly ajar. Inside, I found Cassidy alone, sitting at my grandmother's writing desk, going through the drawers. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. She didn't even look up, getting a feel for my new home. "Just checking what's worth keeping and what I'll replace." "This isn't your home and you're trespassing," I said, pulling out my phone. "Leave now or I'm calling the police." Cassidy stood slowly, a smug smile on her face. "You might want to hold off on that. Mom and Dad are meeting with the county clerk right now. Turns out there was an issue with how the property was transferred after Grandma's death. Something about improper documentation." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Let's just say Dad's firm handles accounting for some very important people in the county offices. People who might be willing to expedite certain paperwork or overlook certain details." I stared at my sister, this person who shared my blood but felt like a stranger. "Are you actually admitting that our parents are committing fraud?" She shrugged. "I'm not admitting anything. I'm just letting you know that you might want to start packing instead of making threats." After practically shoving Cassidy out the door, I called Sarah again, this time barely able to form coherent sentences through my panic. She tried to calm me down, assuring me that property records couldn't just be changed on a whim, but promised to look into it immediately. 3 hours later, she called back, her voice grim. "Meloria, I don't know how they did it, but there's a new deed on file. It shows the property being transferred from your grandmother's estate directly to Cassidy, dated 2 weeks after the original transfer to you. It looks legitimate at first glance, all the right stamps and signatures." "That's impossible," I whispered. "It should be," Sarah agreed. "I've never seen anything like this. It's either a clerical error or my father called in favors to falsify documents I finished for her." "I'll file emergency motions today," Sarah promised. "But Meloria, you need to understand, if your father has the influence he seems to have, this could get complicated." Complicated was an understatement. By that evening, I received the text message that would change everything. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. Your sister owns that house now." I barely slept that night. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw my family's faces, not as they were now, cold and calculating, but as they had been throughout my childhood. My father teaching me to ride a bike, my mother braiding my hair before school, Cassidy and I building sand castles on this very beach. Had it all been conditional? Was their love tied to my compliance? As dawn broke, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and sat at my grandmother's writing desk, the one Cassidy had been rifling through. Running my fingers along the smooth mahogany surface, I noticed a small indent I hadn't felt before. Curious, I examined it more closely and discovered a nearly invisible seam along the back panel. With trembling fingers, I pressed and felt something give way. The panel slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small, leather-bound book and an envelope with my name written in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. My heart pounding, I opened the envelope first. "My dearest Meloria, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and you've discovered my little secret. I've always loved mysteries, something you and I shared from the time you were old enough to read Nancy Drew under the covers with a flashlight. I'm leaving you the lake house because I know you truly appreciate not just its value but its soul. You understand that a home holds more than furniture and fixtures. It holds memories, dreams, and legacies. I fear that after I'm gone there may be discord. Your parents have never approved of my independence, and they've always favored giving Cassidy what she wants rather than what she needs. They may pressure you to give up what is rightfully yours. The journal enclosed contains information that may prove useful if such a situation arises. In my younger years, before I met your grandfather, I worked as a legal secretary. I saw how people could manipulate the system, and I learned to protect myself. Remember, sometimes the strongest position is the one others don't know you hold. All my love, Grandma Eliza. With shaking hands, I opened the journal and began to read. What I discovered made my coffee grow cold beside me as hours passed. My grandmother, my sweet, gardening-loving grandmother, had been meticulously documenting my father's financial indiscretions for years. It started when she loaned him money to start his accounting practice, money he never fully repaid. But more disturbingly, she had noticed discrepancies in how he managed her finances. Being a former legal secretary with a sharp eye for numbers, she began investigating quietly. She documented instances where he had transferred small sums from her accounts to his own, believing she wouldn't notice. She had copied bank statements, recorded conversations, and even photographed documents she found in his office during family gatherings. The most damning evidence was related to a client of my father's, the same county clerk, who was now apparently helping him falsify property records. According to my grandmother's notes, my father had been helping this man hide assets during a divorce 5 years ago, something that could cost both of them their professional licenses, if not worse. I felt sick reading it all. Not just because of what my father had done, but because my grandmother had carried this burden alone. She hadn't turned him in, presumably to protect our family from scandal. But she had created this insurance policy, this leverage, and left it for me to find. With renewed determination, I called Sarah and asked her to come to the lake house immediately. "Bring a forensic accountant if you can," I added. "I have something you need to see." While waiting for Sarah to arrive, I scanned every page of the journal and backed up the files to multiple secure locations. I took photos of the hidden compartment, the envelope, and the original documents. Then I carefully returned everything exactly as I had found it. Sarah arrived with Timothy Wong, a forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud cases. They spent hours reviewing the materials, their expressions growing more serious by the minute. "This is extensive," Timothy finally said, looking up from his tablet. "If even half of what's documented here is accurate, your father could face serious charges. Not just professional sanctions, but criminal prosecution." Sarah nodded in agreement. "The statute of limitations hasn't expired on most of these incidents. And the connection to the county clerk explains how they managed to file that fraudulent deed so quickly." "So what do?" I asked, feeling both powerful and terrified. Sarah thought for a moment. "Legally, we have enough to challenge the fraudulent deed and potentially report your father to the State Board of Accountancy and law enforcement. But that's nuclear. It would destroy your family relationships permanently and possibly send your father to prison." "They're already destroying our relationship," I pointed out bitterly. "True," Sarah conceded, "but you need to be sure this is the path you want to take. Once certain bells are rung, they can't be unrung." Timothy offered an alternative. "There is another approach. We could use this information as leverage in a private negotiation. Not blackmail, we'd never suggest that, but a frank discussion about mutual interests." The thought of confronting my family with this information made my stomach churn, but the alternative, losing my grandmother's house and letting them get away with their scheme, was worse. "I need time to think," I said finally. After Sarah and Timothy left, I walked down to the shore and sat watching the waves, just as my grandmother and I had done countless times. What would she want me to do? She hadn't turned my father in when she had the chance, but she had made sure I would have protection if I needed it. As the sun set over the lake, casting long orange reflections across the water, I made my decision. I wouldn't just fight to keep the house, I would ensure that my family never attempted something like this again. But I would do it my way, with calculation rather than rage, strategy rather than emotion. I returned to the house and began preparing for the confrontation that would either destroy my family completely or force a reckoning long overdue. I spent the night creating a detailed presentation of everything I had discovered, organizing the evidence chronologically and preparing talking points. By morning, I was exhausted but resolved. I sent a group text to my parents, and Cassidy, I know about the fraudulent deed. I know about Dad's arrangement with the county clerk. I know everything. Meeting at the lake house 2 p.m. today. Come alone, no lawyers. This is your only chance to resolve this privately. The responses were immediate and panicked. Dad, what are you talking about? Don't make accusations you can't back up. Mom Meloria, you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle things. Cassidy, LOL, whatever. You're bluffing. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Sarah and updated her on my plan. She insisted on being present, but agreed to stay in the background unless legal intervention became necessary. Timothy would be on standby, ready to join remotely if needed. As 2 p.m. approached, I set up my laptop on the dining room table and arranged 3 folders, one for each family member, containing printed copies of the most relevant documents. I made sure the house was immaculate, partly out of habit, but mostly because I wanted them to see exactly what they were trying to take from me. At exactly 2 p.m., I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. The next chapter of this family drama was about to begin, and for the first time, I would be the one writing it. They arrived together in my father's Mercedes, a united front against me. I watched through the window as they huddled briefly in the driveway, my father gesturing emphatically, while my mother nodded and Cassidy checked her phone, apparently bored by even this level of conspiracy. The family dynamics on full display. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and smoothed down my shirt, a simple blue button-down that had been a gift from my grandmother on my 30th birthday. For when you need to feel both professional and loved, she had said. Today I needed both in abundance. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Before you come in, I want to make one thing clear. This is still my house legally and morally. You're here as guests, and I expect you to behave accordingly. My father's face reddened. According to county records, according to fraudulent records that you bribed Harold Denton to file, I interrupted calmly. Yes, I know his name. I know the dates of your meetings. I know about the $25,000 that disappeared from your client trust account on the day the false deed was filed. I know everything, Dad. The color drained from his face, and for a moment I thought he might actually collapse on my doorstep. My mother grabbed his arm to steady him. Can we please come inside? She asked, her voice small. The neighbors, always concerned with appearances. I stepped aside and led them to the dining room where my materials were arranged. Sarah sat quietly in a corner armchair, her presence immediately drawing my father's attention. Who's this? He demanded, some of his bravado returning. You know Sarah Chen, my attorney. I gestured for everyone to sit. She's here to witness our conversation and provide legal counsel if necessary. This is ridiculous, Cassidy scoffed, though she looked less confident than she sounded. You're putting on some kind of show to intimidate us, but we all know you've got nothing. Rather than argue, I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them. On display was a photo of the hidden compartment in my grandmother's desk, the leather journal clearly visible. Grandma Eliza kept records, I said simply. Very detailed records. I clicked through to the next image, a bank statement showing a transfer from her account to my father's, with her handwritten note specifying she had not authorized it. Then another, and another. Stop, my father said hoarsely after the 5th slide. Where did you get these? Grandma had a secret compartment in her writing desk, the desk Cassidy was so eager to take yesterday. She left me a letter explaining that she'd been documenting your financial management of her affairs for years. She suspected you might try something like this after she was gone. I slid the 3 folders toward them. These contain copies of some of the evidence. Not all, there's much more stored securely with multiple third parties. It details not only what you've been doing with Grandma's money, but also how you helped Harold Denton hide assets during his divorce, and the apparent quid pro quo arrangement you've maintained ever since. My mother opened her folder with trembling hands. "Robert," she whispered, turning to my father. "Tell me this isn't true." He didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the documents before him. Cassidy hadn't even touched her folder. She was staring at me with a mixture of shock and newfound respect. "Here's what's going to happen." I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "First, you're going to contact Harold Denton today and have the fraudulent deed reversed. The lake house will be properly recorded as mine as Grandma intended. Second, you will sign a legally binding agreement never to contest my ownership again." My father finally looked up, his face ashen. "And if we refuse," Sarah spoke for the first time, "then we take this evidence to the State Board of Accountancy, the Bar Association, and possibly the district attorney. Mr. Walker, you're looking at potential disbarment, loss of your CPA license, and criminal charges." "You would do that to your own father?" he asked me, his voice cracking. The question hit me hard. Would I? Could I actually follow through and potentially send my own father to prison? I looked at each of them. The family who had raised me, loved me in their way, but ultimately betrayed me when it served their interests. "I don't want to," I said honestly. "I'm giving you a chance to make this right without legal consequences. But understand this, I will not be bullied or manipulated into giving up what is rightfully mine. Not anymore." A heavy silence filled the room. Through the dining room windows, I could see the lake shimmering in the afternoon sun. Somewhere, a boat horn sounded in the distance. "I'll contact Harold," my father finally said, deflated. "The deed will be corrected by tomorrow." My mother began to cry quietly. Cassidy sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. "There's one more thing," I said, reaching for a fourth folder I had prepared. "This is a loan agreement. It states that I will provide Cassidy with $50,000 to put toward a down payment on a home of her own. Not a gift, a loan with reasonable terms and a payment schedule she can manage on her current income." Cassidy's head snapped up. What Grandma wanted family taken care of, just not at the expense of others. "I'm honoring that spirit. You need stability, Cassidy, but taking mine isn't the solution. This gives you a fresh start without destroying our family completely." For the first time in years, maybe ever, I saw genuine gratitude in my sister's eyes. "Why would you do this after what we tried to do to you? Because despite everything, you're still my sister. And because I refuse to become what you all seem to think, I am selfish and uncaring." My father had pulled out his phone and was already texting, presumably to Harold Denton. My mother was still crying, but the quality of her tears seemed different now, less desperate, more remorseful. Sarah quietly produced the legal documents I had asked her to prepare: the agreement regarding the house, the loan terms for Cassidy, and a confidentiality agreement binding all parties. One by one, my family members signed. As they prepared to leave, my mother lingered behind. "Meloria, I'm so sorry. We should never have." "Not now, Mom," I said, suddenly exhausted. "I need time." She nodded sadly and followed my father and sister out the door. I watched from the window as they drove away, a strange emptiness filling my chest where the anger had been. Sarah placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did well." It was as clean a resolution as we could have hoped for. "Then why doesn't it feel like a victory?" I asked. "Because it's your family," she replied simply. "And because you're a good person who never wanted it to come to this." After Sarah left, I wandered through the house, touching the walls, the furniture, the door frames, all the places that held memories of my grandmother. I ended up on the dock watching the sunset, just as we used to do together. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered to the fading light. "I protected what you entrusted to me. But I don't know what happens now. How do we move forward from here?" As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, I realized the journey wasn't over. Securing the house was just the beginning. The harder part, rebuilding trust, redefining boundaries, healing wounds, still lay ahead. You know, family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind. That moment when you realize the people who should protect you most are the ones causing harm, it's earth-shattering. I've been sitting here at this lake for hours now, wondering if I made the right choices today. But sometimes standing up for yourself means facing uncomfortable truths. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to confront family over something serious? Drop a comment below with your experience. And if this story is resonating with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Now let's get back to what happened after that intense confrontation. In the days following the confrontation, silence descended like a heavy fog. My family didn't call or text, and I made no effort to reach out. The property deed was corrected as promised. I received confirmation from the county records office within 48 hours. Cassidy's loan documents were processed, and the money was transferred to an escrow account, pending her finding a suitable property. On paper, everything was resolved neatly, but emotionally, we were in uncharted territory. I threw myself into work, taking on additional architectural projects that allowed me to work remotely from the lake house. The rhythm of designing spaces for others provided a welcome distraction from the destruction of my own family space. Each evening I would sit on the dock with a glass of wine, watching the sunset, and trying to process the tangled emotions that knotted my chest. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was a local realtor calling about a property 2 miles down the shore from mine. "I understand you're an architect who specializes in restoration," the woman said cheerfully. "The Johnson family just purchased a 1,940 seconds lake house that needs significant work, and your name was recommended by someone in the area. Would you be interested in consulting on the project?" Curious, I agreed to meet the Johnsons the following day. When I arrived at the address, I was surprised to find a small bungalow with peeling paint and a sagging porch, but beautiful bones and a spectacular view. Even more surprising was finding Cassidy sitting on the front steps. "Hey," she said awkwardly, standing as I approached. "Hey," I replied, confused. "What are you doing here?" She gestured toward the house. "I'm the Johnson family." "Well, just me. I used a fake name with the realtor because I wasn't sure you'd come if you knew it was me." I folded my arms, suddenly defensive. "So there's no job?" "No, there is," she said quickly. "I bought this place. It was all I could afford, even with the loan. And it definitely needs work." She attempted a smile. "A lot of work." I looked at the house more carefully. It was indeed a disaster. Water damage, outdated electrical, probably asbestos in the popcorn ceiling, but it had potential. It reminded me of my grandmother's house before my renovations. "Why me?" I asked. "There are plenty of architects in Cincinnati." Cassidy looked down, scuffing the toe of her boot against the step. "Because you're good. Because I've seen what you did with Grandma's place. And because I owe you an apology. A real one, not the forced kind Mom and Dad might give eventually." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I've been jealous of you my entire life," she admitted. "You were always so perfect, so together. Everything came easy to you." I couldn't help but laugh at that. "Easy? Are you kidding me? I worked myself to exhaustion trying to meet their expectations, our parents' expectations. You were the one who got away with everything." Cassidy shook her head. "I got away with it because they didn't think I could do better. Their low expectations were a different kind of prison. You had pressure, but you also had their respect. I had freedom, but it came with the knowledge that they thought I was a lost cause. I hadn't considered it that way before." We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the gentle lapping of lake waves filling the space between us. "Look," Cassidy finally said, "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. What we did, what I participated in, was terrible. But I'd like a chance to try to make it right, starting with being honest with each other." I studied my sister's face. There was a vulnerability there I hadn't seen before, or perhaps had never looked for. "Show me the house," I said finally. For the next hour, we walked through the dilapidated bungalow. I pointed out structural issues, made recommendations, and sketched possible layouts on a notepad. It was the longest civil conversation we'd had in years, possibly ever. There was something freeing about focusing on a shared project rather than our complicated history. "I can help you with the plans," I said as we finished the tour. "But I'm not doing this for free, even for family. Especially for family." Cassidy nodded. "I wouldn't expect you to." "I'm prepared to pay your full rate. And I'm not ready to have Sunday dinners or holidays together yet," I added. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that either. Mom and Dad are struggling with everything that happened. Dad, especially. His practice is under review by the state board, apparently not just because of our situation, but other irregularities they've discovered." I felt a twinge of guilt, quickly followed by resolve. He made his choices. Multiple times. I know Cassidy agreed. I'm not defending him. Just letting you know that there are consequences happening that go beyond our family drama. We exchanged contact information and agreed to meet the following week to discuss preliminary designs. As I turned to leave, Cassidy called after me. "Meloria, thank you. Not just for this, but for the loan. You could have destroyed all of us and you chose not to." I thought about that during the drive home. Had I made the right choice in showing mercy? Or was I just conditioned to put family first, even when they didn't deserve it? Time would tell. Over the next 3 months, Cassidy and I settled into a new kind of relationship. Not close friends, not estranged siblings, but something in between professional collaborators with a cautious personal connection. I designed a renovation plan that worked with her limited budget recommended trustworthy contractors, and occasionally stopped by to check on progress. One unexpected outcome was discovering that Cassidy had a genuine interest in interior design. She had creative ideas that complemented my technical expertise, and she wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty with the actual work. I found myself looking forward to our meetings, curious to see what she'd accomplished since my last visit. My parents were a different matter entirely. My mother sent tentative text messages every few weeks, which I answered politely but briefly. My father remained silent. Through Cassidy, I learned that his accounting practice had been placed under supervision for 6 months, and he had been required to pay substantial fines, but he had avoided criminal charges. I was relieved despite everything. 6 months after the confrontation, I received a formal letter from my father. Not a text or an email, but an actual letter written on his personal stationery delivered by mail. Inside was a 5-page handwritten apology detailing his actions, his regrets, and his hopes for eventual reconciliation. He didn't make excuses or ask for immediate forgiveness. Instead, he acknowledged the damage he had done to our relationship and expressed willingness to rebuild trust on my terms in my time. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I called him the next day, and though our conversation was strained, it was civil. We agreed to meet for lunch the following week, just the two of us on neutral ground. Healing doesn't happen overnight, especially when trust has been so thoroughly broken. But that fall, as I sat on my dock watching the leaves change colors around the lake, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for months. My grandmother's house was secure, my sister was finding her own path, and my parents were facing the consequences of their actions while making genuine attempts to repair the damage. I had discovered my own strength in the process. Not just the ability to stand up for myself, but also the wisdom to know when to extend grace without sacrificing boundaries. As winter approached, I received a surprising invitation from Cassidy. Would I join her for Thanksgiving dinner at her newly renovated lake house, just us, she specified. Not Mom and Dad. I'm not ready for that whole dynamic yet either. I accepted. When I arrived, I was amazed by the transformation of the property. The sagging porch had been rebuilt into a charming covered deck with Adirondack chairs facing the water. Inside, the once dark rooms were now filled with light, the walls painted in soft blues and greens that echoed the lake's palette. Many of the furnishings were second-hand pieces she had restored herself, a talent I never knew she possessed. "This place is beautiful," I said sincerely. "You've done incredible work here." Cassidy beamed with pride. "I couldn't have done it without your help, both the financial kind and the expertise kind." We prepared dinner together, moving around her small kitchen with surprising ease. The conversation flowed naturally as we chopped vegetables and checked on the turkey. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of tension when certain topics arose, but it was genuine. As we sat down to eat, Cassidy raised her wine glass. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to Grandma Eliza, who somehow knew exactly what we both needed." I clinked my glass against hers. "To Grandma," I agreed, "and to finding our own paths." Later, as we sat by the fire watching the first snow begin to fall over the lake, Cassidy turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think she knew, Grandma, I mean? Do you think she knew what would happen when she left you the house?" I considered this. I think she knew there would be conflict, but I also think she hoped it would eventually lead to something better, that forcing us to confront the family dynamics might eventually heal them. "Well," Cassidy said, watching the snowflakes swirl outside the window, she was right. Winter melted into spring, and with the changing seasons came gradual shifts in our family dynamic. My lunch with my father had been followed by coffee meetings every few weeks, each one slightly less awkward than the last. My mother had invited me shopping, a tradition we had once enjoyed before everything fell apart. I declined the first two invitations but accepted the third, and found myself actually enjoying her company as we browsed antique stores looking for pieces for my continued lake house renovations. Cassidy and I had fallen into a routine of Sunday morning kayaking when weather permitted, followed by brunch at either her house or mine. During one such brunch in late April, she broached the subject we'd been dancing around. "Mom asked if we might all get together for Dad's birthday next month," she said, carefully studying her coffee cup rather than meeting my eyes. "Nothing big, just dinner at their house. What do you think?" I took a deep breath. "I think maybe it's time." The dinner was scheduled for May 15th. As the date approached, my anxiety grew. I found myself dreaming of the confrontation again, waking up with my heart racing and my grandmother's journal clutched in my mind like a shield. Sarah checked in regularly, reminding me that I could cancel if it felt too overwhelming. "Reconciliation doesn't have to happen on their timeline," she insisted. But deep down, I wanted this. Wanted some version of my family back in my life, however transformed our relationships might be. On the evening of the dinner, I arrived at my parents' house exactly on time, a bottle of my father's favorite scotch in hand. Cassidy's car was already in the driveway. I sat in my own car for several minutes, gathering courage before finally approaching the front door. My mother answered, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Meloria, come in, come in." She embraced me briefly, not the suffocating hug of old, but a gentle acknowledgement of both connection and space. The house looked different. The formal living room furniture I had grown up with had been replaced by more casual, comfortable pieces. Family photos still lined the mantel, but new ones had been added, including one of Cassidy standing proudly in front of her renovated lake house. My father emerged from the kitchen looking older than I remembered. His hair had more gray, and he'd lost weight. "Meloria," he said, his voice carrying both warmth and uncertainty. "Thank you for coming." Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. We carefully navigated conversation around safe topics, my recent projects, Cassidy's new job as an assistant at an interior design firm, local news. No one mentioned the lake house dispute directly, though it hovered in the background like a ghost we all acknowledged but chose not to name. After dessert, my father cleared his throat. I have something I'd like to share with all of you. He disappeared into his study and returned carrying a large manila envelope. These past few months have given me a lot of time to reflect about the kind of husband, father, and person I've been, about the example I've set. He opened the envelope and removed several documents. I've made some changes. First, I've restructured my practice. I've taken on a partner who oversees all ethical compliance and financial transactions. I'm not the sole decision maker anymore. He slid the business reorganization papers toward the center of the table. Second, your mother and I have updated our will and estate plans. He glanced at my mother, who nodded encouragingly. Everything is divided equally between you both, with complete transparency. No hidden accounts, no secret arrangements. You're both welcome to review everything with your own attorneys. He placed those documents beside the first set. And third, he continued, his voice catching slightly. I found these in my office. He carefully laid out several yellowed photographs. They were in a box of your grandmother's things that I was supposed to give you after the funeral, Meloria. I kept them out of spite, I think. That was wrong. I leaned forward to see the photos. They showed my grandmother as a young woman standing beside architectural landmarks around the world, the Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, the Taj Mahal. In each one, she looked vibrant and free, her smile radiant. She traveled for nearly 2 years after college, my father explained. Before she met my father, before settling down, she never talked much about that time, but she kept these photos all her life. I picked up one showing her standing in front of the Parthenon architectural plans visible in her hand. She wanted to be an architect, I whispered suddenly, understanding our connection on an even deeper level. My father nodded. Yes, she gave it up when she married my father. Different times. He hesitated. She saw herself in you, I think. Not just your interests, but your determination. I was jealous of that bond in a way I'm not proud of. I felt tears welling in my eyes. Thank you for these. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. We've made terrible mistakes, Meloria. Choices that nearly destroyed this family. We can't undo them, but we can try to be better going forward. We all can, Cassidy added quietly. I've done plenty. I'm not proud of either. I looked around the table at my imperfect, complicated family. I'm still angry sometimes, I admitted. I still have moments where I don't know if I can trust any of you fully again. That's fair, my father acknowledged. Trust has to be rebuilt. We understand that. As the evening concluded, we made tentative plans to gather again the following month. Not weekly Sunday dinners like before, we weren't ready for that level of regular contact, but a gradual reintroduction of family traditions on new terms. In the car afterward, I called Sarah to update her. It went better than expected, I told her. Not perfect, but better. That's how healing usually works, she replied. Small steps forward, occasional steps back. The important thing is the direction. Throughout the summer, our family found a new rhythm. My parents visited my lake house for the first time since the confrontation. A significant milestone that initially filled me with anxiety, but ultimately proved healing. My mother helped me plant a garden using cuttings from my grandmother's original plants. My father fixed the dock railing that had been loose for months. Cassidy and I continued our Sunday ritual, sometimes joined by my parents, sometimes not. We all attended family therapy separately at first, then occasionally together, working through decades of dysfunctional patterns with professional guidance. By the 1-year anniversary of the confrontation, we had created something new from the ashes of our old family dynamic. Not perfect, not without occasional tension, but fundamentally healthier. We had learned to communicate directly instead of manipulating, to respect boundaries instead of bulldozing them, to support each other's independence instead of viewing it as a threat. One evening, in late summer, as we gathered for a lakeside barbecue at my house, I found myself watching my family from the dock. My father was grilling, engaged in animated conversation with Cassidy's new boyfriend who seemed unfazed by our complicated history. My mother and Cassidy were setting the outdoor table laughing about something I couldn't hear. I felt my grandmother's presence strongly in that moment, as if she were standing beside me on the dock. "You were right," I whispered to her memory. "Sometimes the strongest position is the one others don't know you hold. But sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to put down your weapons." The family I had now wasn't the one I had grown up with, and it certainly wasn't perfect. But it was authentic, in a way it had never been before. We had faced our worst selves and chosen to build something better. As I joined them at the table, I silently thanked my grandmother for her final gift, not just the lake house, but the opportunity for all of us to rebuild with truth as our foundation. 2 years have passed since that text message that changed everything. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. Your sister owns that house now." What began as a devastating betrayal ultimately became the catalyst for transformation none of us could have imagined. My lake house remains my sanctuary, but it's no longer my fortress against family. It's become a gathering place where new memories are created alongside the cherished ones with my grandmother. The hidden compartment in her writing desk now holds my own journal, a record not of betrayal, but of healing. Looking back, I realized that my grandmother's true legacy wasn't the property itself, but the courage to stand up for what's right while remaining open to reconciliation. She knew the house would force us to confront the dysfunction that had plagued our family for generations. In her wisdom, she understood that sometimes things must break completely before they can be rebuilt stronger. What would your family do if faced with such a betrayal? Have you experienced the complicated journey of family reconciliation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice and healing resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that family wounds can heal even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most valuable family inheritance isn't property or money, but the wisdom to know when to fight and when to forgive.